สวัสดีครับเดี๋ยววันนี้เนี่ยเดี๋ยวผมจะมาอินเทอร์วิวนะครับกับตัว ChatGPT เดี๋ยวผมจะให้ ChatGPT เนี่ยเป็นอินเทอร์วิวเวอร์แล้วเดี๋ยวเรามาดูกันนะว่าประสบการณ์มันจะเป็นยังไงนะครับวันนี้เนี่ยอาจจะไม่ได้ reflect เนาะว่าอินเทอร์วิวจริงๆมันเป็นยังไงแต่ว่าก็แค่จะบอกว่าไอตัว tools อย่างเช่น ChatGPT Claude พวกเนี้ยมันก็สามารถช่วยให้คุณทวนได้ตอนที่จะซ้อมสัมภาษณ์แต่เรามาดูกันว่ามันมีประสิทธิภาพแค่ไหนนะครับเริ่มกัน Hey ChatGPT, could you be my interviewer for the day for a data science and machine learning role?
Of course, I'd be happy to help. We can run through some interview questions and scenarios. Just let me know what kind of questions or topics you'd like to focus on. Technical skills, behavioral questions, or system design.
Some technical and behavioral question that does not touch on my personal projects.
Got it. Let's start with a technical question. For a data science and machine learning role, can you explain the bias-variance trade-off and how you would address it when building a model? And for a behavioral question, tell me about a time when you had to explain a complex technical concept to a non-technical stakeholder. How did you ensure they understood it?
Okay, let's start one by one. The first one, bias variance trade-off, right? So for bias, it means that we are building a non-complex model, like a linear regression or something, which usually it becomes like you usually like underfit the data, causing the model to be less performance. Whereas in a variance kind of area, you would be building a too complex model that will cause you to overfit the data, leading to loss in generalization performances. So usually in a bias variance trade-off, you would want to balance the performance by not having too complex model and not too simple model, so that it also generalizes well and performs well.
That's a great explanation. You covered the core idea well. The bias-variance trade-off is all about finding that sweet spot between underfitting and overfitting to ensure the model generalizes well to new data. Nicely done. Ready for the behavioral question?
What is it again? I forgot.
No problem. Here they are again. Technical question. Can you explain the bias-variance
No.
trade-off?
I just mean the behavioral. I already answered the technical.
Got it. The behavioral question was, tell me about a time when you had to explain a complex technical concept to a non-technical stakeholder. How did you ensure they understood it?
Okay, so actually there are many times which I had to deal with such situation, but I would try to deal with the problem by talking about by not giving out any too much technical details. I would focus on how the tools could be used to solve the problem. So for example, if I were to build a RAG application for a customer, I would not be telling customers in too much detail about how RAG works, how that part works, but I would only be telling the minimum for the users to understand, and such as like what kind of data do we need, what are the expectation, what are the expectation of each questions if you answer at this stage, rather than going deep into the technical details. And then if the end user wanted to understand things more, then I would only go into technical details. But usually I would try to show this point by building it out so they see the product. And if they can see the product, they will understand it better without having to explain much.
That sounds like a great approach. Focusing on the business value and user expectations helps non-technical stakeholders grasp the impact of the solution without getting lost in the technical details. Demonstrating a working prototype or a simplified version can make abstract concepts more tangible and relatable. Nice job.
Okay, what's next?
Great. Let's move on to another technical question. How would you handle missing data in a dataset? Can you explain a few techniques you might use and when you choose one technique over another?
Interesting. So there are many ways to handle missing data. For example, you could, for one, you could drop that column entirely. I'm assuming that you are talking in the context of training some machine learning model. So usually, if you have a lot of data already, it is okay to drop that column and then to drop that row and not train that particular transaction. Another way of going around it is you could do some imputation. So what imputation means is you can do an average or a mean or a counting, depending on what context you're at, to fill in the missing values so that it is more complete. So those are the two ways.
Great explanation. Dropping rows or columns with missing data is indeed a good option if you have a large data set and the missingness is random. Imputation methods like mean, median, or mode are also useful, especially when the missing data is minimal and you want to preserve as much information as possible. Another advanced technique could be using models to predict the missing values based on other features. Choosing the right technique depends on the data context and how much missing data you have.
Good point. I didn't think of that. Okay. What question would you have next?
All right, let's go with another behavioral question.
Okay.
Can you share an example?
Go on.
No worries. All right, here's another question. How do you approach feature selection and engineering when building a machine learning model?
Okay, so actually, right, building a machine learning model is difficult if you don't understand the business context behind it. So usually I would approach this by talking with key stakeholders first to identify the key features which actually impact what we're trying to predict, classify, or whatever we want. After having identified those, then I would talk to the data engineering team so that they would provide us with the data and we prioritize whichever data is available first. Then afterwards, we would do some feature engineering like you mentioned. We could, for example, if we're doing a project about demand forecast, we may want to add some seasons columns to the data by looking at the month or logging down the time of day, creating those features. And that's many features we could do feature engineering from. For example, we could also, in a medical care kind of scenario, you may want to calculate BMI by combining multiple columns, things like that. So those are the line of thought. Or in a demand forecasting, you could also do some window lagging. So what this means is you could ask what is the sales today to 7 days ago and 2 weeks ago, things like that, and use that as a feature. So those are the ways we could get more features. And after that, it's about experimentation, right? And seeing the relationship between inputs and outputs and try to get the best outcome by doing some tuning, splitting the data on validation test set to see the best kind of combinations of features. Yep.
That's a solid strategy. Engaging with stakeholders to understand the business context ensures that the features you engineer are meaningful and aligned with the problem you're trying to solve. Prioritizing available data and iterating on feature engineering techniques, like adding temporal features or creating new metrics, helps refine the model. Experimentation and validation are crucial to identify which features truly improve the model's performance. Nicely done.
Okay, let's go with a few more questions, maybe 2 more questions.
Sure thing. Here's another technical question. How would you assess whether your machine learning model is overfitting or underfitting, and what steps would you take to address it? And for a behavioral question, describe a situation where you had to deal with conflicting priorities on a project. How did you handle it?
Okay, let's go one by one because my memory is bad. So first one is, how do I identify if the output is, the model is overfitting or underfitting, right? Is that the question?
Yes, that's the question.
Okay.
How would you assess if your model is overfitting or underfitting, and what steps would you take to address it?
Okay, so in that scenario, let's start by looking at overfitting first. So usually what overfitting means is the data, when you train the model on some data, it performs very well on that specific data. But when tested on a different data set, a different test set, it usually does not perform as well. So what we could do to improve this overfitting or improve underfitting is we could typically break down train the model with train validation and test sets, and so that we could train the model and test it on the data that it hasn't seen before. Moreover, if we want to be sure, we could do further testing like k-fold cross-validation to ensure that your experimental outcome is robust and it makes the most sense and it generalizes well. So k-fold would really help with checking if your model is being generalized well as well. Those are the kind of line of thoughts that I am thinking about.
Great approach. Using a train validation test split and techniques like k-fold cross-validation are excellent ways to detect and mitigate overfitting. If you find the model is overfitting, you can also consider techniques like regularization, reducing model complexity, or adding more training data. For underfitting, increasing model complexity or adding more features can help. You've covered the key points well.
Yeah, good point. I totally forgot to mention about regularization. Okay, so last one, your behavioral question is what?
The behavioral question is, describe a situation where you had to deal with conflicting priorities on a project. How did you handle it?
Okay, so if there's a conflicting priority on the project, what I would do is I would need to list or log down all the tasks I have in hand, right? Usually, like in real life, these tasks may come from various departments. It might not come from my department. It may come from my department. Then I sort it out by what I think is the most suitable, and I let my manager cross-validate or cross-check whether this priority is correct and whether my assumption of, let's say, I want to do this task on Monday, this task on Tuesday is correct, and on Wednesday it is correct, and then task on Friday. So I just sort everything down by priority, and for a task which is out of my department, I just ask the manager, can I not do it? Should I do it or not? If I have spare time, I would do it, but I wouldn't if I don't. So key takeaway is to write down the task you do, sort it, and then check with your manager and then follow it and keep logging your activities as you go on so that you have clear visibility.
That's a very practical and effective approach. Prioritizing tasks and getting your manager's input ensures alignment with the overall project goals. It's also great that you maintain flexibility for tasks outside your immediate scope when time allows. This kind of organization and communication is key to managing conflicting priorities smoothly.
Okay, so I want you to rate my response out of 10 as an interviewer. What do you think I get out of 10, and what is a good thing about my response and what's something I could improve on?
Sure, I'd give your responses a solid 8 out of 10. You demonstrated a clear understanding of the concepts and provided thoughtful, structured answers. You also brought in relevant examples and practical.
Repeat your feedback.
Of course, I'd rate your responses around 8 out of 10. You demonstrated a clear understanding of the concept. You also included relevant examples and practical approaches, which is a strong point. One area for improvement could be to add more specific examples or metrics to quantify your experiences. Overall, your answers were well-rounded and insightful.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Take care and bye for now.
อันนี้ก็คือจะเป็นประสบการณ์นะครับการอินเทอร์วิวกับ ChatGPT แบบเล่นๆก็ถ้าใครอยากให้ทำคลิปแบบไหนอีกหรืออยากให้ทำซีรีส์การอินเทอร์วิวกับ AI ต่อไปเรื่อยๆก็บอกได้ในคอมเมนต์นะครับวันนี้ผมลาไปเท่านี้นะครับสวัสดีครับ